entire lives to see what happened with them. And one of the things that they noticed during that study was that the number one contributor to genuine long-term human happiness is this. It's not making more money, and it's not having fame or prestige or status, which are things that motivate people on a moment-to-moment basis, on a day-to-day basis. In general, I think that's pretty widely takes place. But what really actually genuinely can deliver genuine long-term human happiness is healthy and fulfilling relationships. And I really would like to focus on that for just a minute because of the profundity of that information. And if you can allow it to really sink in with you, and you can recognize that if you have nothing but allies around you, you have no one around you in your space, in your world, except people who want the best for you, you want the best for them, you feel a sense of partnership or allyship with them, your life is going to have a certain character to it. And it's going to have a fundamentally different character to it rather than someone who has all kinds of enemies around them, all kinds of people. There are all kinds of uncompleted conflicts, and there's unspoken difficulties, unspoken resentments that never get resolved. And if those are the kinds of relationships that someone has, and they maintain those relationships unconsciously over decades, they're going to have a different kind of a life rather than someone who knows how to invest in their relationships through communication skills effectively. And that person's going to have a fundamentally different experience of being alive over decades. And so if the number one contributor to long-term genuine human happiness is fulfilling relationships, the number one contributor to fulfilling relationships is communication skills. And so if we know how to relate with people during crisis and also during times of peace and well-being and rapport in ways that really create the kind of connections and the kind of relationships that are built on our values and well-being and enjoyment and ease and pleasure and gratitude and service, that's what we want in life. That's the best that we can have, is just to be available to the people in our lives, have them feel like they can trust us and be available to us, and just enjoy the present moment with them. And the way to do it is through communication skills, which we can use to kind of complete old conflicts of the past and resolve them so they don't even exist anymore. There's no harboring of resentments or anything like that. Everything that is needing to be complete, or we want to be complete, we want to be done with it, we know how to resolve those things in our relationships. And when we know how to do that, and we take the steps every day through every single conversation and every single share that goes back and forth, we deliberately and intentionally use our communication towards that end, we are going to see over the long term some magnificent transformations in our lives. And we're going to feel closer to the universe, closer to whatever we consider to be God or the divine or holiness or sacredness. We're going to be embodying that, and we're going to be in relationship with that, with the people in our lives, and also, with any kind of spiritual essence that we feel that we can connect with. So that's really what we're all about here at Mindful Speech. We want to bring mindfulness, the kind of mindfulness that people use in meditation, in order to give up their attachments, give up their plans, give up their fear, give up their resentments. We want to bring that kind of mindfulness into people's communications, into people's conversations, so that over time people can, and actually even very, very quickly, honestly, very, very quickly, you can see amazing transformations in your relationships. Decades-old resentments can disappear. There's one wonderful thing that Marshall Rosenberg, who was the founder of nonviolent communication, used to say pretty often. He used to say that any conflict, or 75% of conflicts, can be resolved in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Once each person can repeat without judgment what the other party is needing, what the other party is longing for, what the other party wants in that conflict. And once you have that information, even conflicts that have been there for maybe 40, 50 years can be resolved and completed in 20 minutes. And so this is one of the main insights that I'd like to share with you and your listeners is when you have a conflict, what people are generally accustomed to is that you have a conflict and you work on the conflict and get into a shared reality or an agreement about what the problem is and what's going on and who's right and who's wrong. So that kind of power, it can lead to a power struggle, that dynamic, which power struggles are a race to the bottom. You never actually get to a place of tremendous fulfillment and connection and gratitude with the other person at the end of a power struggle dynamic. It's just mathematically impossible, if I could, say it like that. So what you really want to do when you have a conflict is recognize one person has one reality, and their perspective, their reality as it occurs to them is their perspective, and that's all any of us have is just our perspective that we carry with us. And so the one person has a perspective, and the other person has a perspective. We have a perspective, and the person who we might consider to be engaging with us in this conflict, maybe our enemy, has their own perspective. And when we know our side and when we know the other person's side, we can actually resolve the conflict very easily for a number of reasons. But it's that kind of transformation that we're talking about with mindful speech training. And that's really the kind of world that we want to live in, is a world that knows how to take a situation that's difficult, where there is a lack of rapport, maybe there's real hatred, very strong difficulties, resentments, and transform that situation into ease and joy, actually, if you could think outside the box. Ease, rapport, trust, respect, and joy. And if you could think of some of your family members who you might have not really felt connected to for years, communication skills can actually bring that kind of remedy into that relationship so that you can actually appreciate them and enjoy them, and they can enjoy you in the way that you'd like to. Not that they have to be super close to you, but you can have them be as close as feels good to you and feel complete about it, not be harboring resentments and difficult emotional states. So that might be, just kind of the introduction to the work that we do. I wonder if anyone has any questions.
Okay, well, let's see. Oh, here. Echo. Excuse me. Hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, can you hear me, James?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you said, I wonder if you have any questions, so you're ready for a breather. So, folks, we're going to do a quick round table, and it's a question. He says, I wonder if anyone has any questions. And I know what I felt like because my daughter passed, and she and I always had this under ripple of resentment, even though we lived together and I loved her, and I wished I had better communication skills. So I'm so happy that James is so educated on this. And I'm going to go first, if you don't mind, James, to Suzanne as a woman and the other lady that called in, and then we'll let Tommy and Rich. Tommy's been working with me for years, so he understands. But let me find the right phone number on here. I think it's 714. No, I think that's Rich. Let's see, 949, I think, is Suzanne. Let's see.
Hi. I'm there. You
got
me. You unmuted me. Yeah. So, James, listen, I thought your conversation was really great, and is it okay if I ask you a really personal question?
Absolutely.
Oh, great. So, talking about the style of communication that you're using, tell me an intimate relationship, a relationship that was a partnership, included sexual intimacy, and was a long-standing relationship. Tell me a great story of where your technique of communication created a change in the relationship. Doesn't have to be good or bad, but just a change in the relationship.
Yeah, question and example. Question example. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That's a good one. Okay.
So I'll just model a little communication technique called mirroring. So if I heard you right, then you'd like to hear from me an example in my life of where these communication skills that I'm talking about have really had some kind of a beautiful transformation or a healing between me and someone in my life. Is that right?
No. No.
Oh, that's not right.
No, I'm asking you to share a personal story where your style of communication created a change. And the change doesn't necessarily, I have a different sort of focus on it. I don't think that change is bad. I think change is inevitable. But I'm asking you to share a personal story where there was a change. And it could have been like you came to the awareness that this person would never really be the person that you wanted to be with, or this person still hadn't resolved their parental business, whatever. But just where it created a change in the dialogue, a real change.
Wonderful. So I really love that there was a bit of a miscommunication there, because it kind of does model that I was trying to take in your question, and I carried some baggage into the word change, and that you had no way of understanding that I carried that baggage into that word, except when I repeat it back to you, then you can recognize, oh, that wasn't actually what I meant. And the thing about communication is that we can't actually know if our communication has landed in the way that we intended, if our message has really been received, unless we check in. So that's one of the basic communication skills. It's kind of one of the foundational skills in communicating. So let me think. There were so many small, like I would call them smaller ones, but major breakthroughs with my previous partner of about 6 years. And what comes to mind is that there would be misunderstandings where one person would say something and then and that would be interpreted as some kind of an insult or some kind of, it would just bring up a lot of shame in the other person, or a lot of embarrassment, or just some kind of negative experience. But once we were able to unpack what had happened, then we realized, there was actually, it's all very understandable, and there was no break in rapport that actually happened. It was just an illusion due to just very understandable misunderstandings. That's kind of a vague description of a dynamic that happened very, very frequently with my previous partner. I'm going to try to find a specific example, but none is coming to my mind right now.
So it's kind of interesting. You said that I didn't have any way of knowing that change was kind of a term that held a lot of baggage for you, but I find that that's really what I do in my work, is that I do find the terms or the words or the spaces within a human's consciousness where there is that dynamic. And I love your conversation. I love your conversation about repeating back to somebody, did I understand you to say the following? Did I hear you to mean? There's so many ways of putting that back in there. And the person, when the person doesn't hear what you're asking or what you're indicating, then you're not even in the same reality for communication. There's no affinity, there's no reality, and there's no communication. It's difficult.
Yeah. I could actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I can share a specific example with you. So, and this is actually a super beautiful example. I'm going to get a little emotional here because it's so beautiful. But after the first time making love with a new partner, right? It's a very wonderful, very emotional, intimate, vulnerable experience. And to meet someone in that way for the first time, a lot of feelings can come up, and there can be, different styles and different little moments of miscommunication or disconnection that happen. And one of the great delights in my experience, quite frankly, in life is to propose to someone who I'm just entering into a relationship with. Why don't we just debrief what just happened, and we'll just share. You tell me what your experience was. I'll tell you what came up for me during that. And I can't tell you the delight that comes up in both parties by understanding and kind of resolving any kind of rough edges that might have happened, any misunderstandings or any awkwardnesses that happened. So that's one specific example that I can tell you. And that the transformation that happened there, or the change that happened there, is like a deep sense of trust and connection. So what could be have a little bit of awkward aftertaste or something like that, a little leftover